In the UK on Friday, a neonatal nurse, Lucy Letby, was found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 more. British police believe that Letby may have harmed more babies during her 6-year career as a children's nurse, and they've launched a helpline for parents to report any concerns. She's due to be sentenced today. She's expected to become only the 3rd woman alive in the UK to be handed a whole life term. And I'm joined now by health editor at the Sunday Times, Shaun Lintern, who has been covering the case from the outset. Good morning, Shaun.
Good morning.
Shaun, for those unfamiliar, can you remind us what this nurse did and how she was discovered?
Yeah, so this dates back all the way to 2015. Lucy Letby was a neonatal nurse working in the Countess of Chester Hospital in the northwest of England. And what started to happen was a series of baby deaths on that unit, unexpected deaths, where babies who suddenly deteriorated. In some cases, they didn't die, but they suffered sudden collapses and needed to be resuscitated. And doctors began to be concerned about a connection between these incidents and Lucy Letby being on shift at the hospital. And fast forward to the trial, and what we now know is that Lucy Letby was murdering babies and attacking babies. She would do this by sometimes injecting them with air into their bloodstream or through tubes into their stomach, which would then mean it was difficult for them to breathe and bring on a cardiac arrest. In other cases, she overfed them with milk. In some cases, she used insulin to poison them. And in one case, the jury found that she actually physically assaulted a baby that left injuries that were akin to a car accident, was what the jury were told. All of that has come out in the trial, but the scandal that's kind of erupted in the last few days here in the UK, and my own investigation for the Sunday Times yesterday really laid out a picture of how NHS managers at the hospital ignored the concerns of doctors, even though discussions about calling the police were had in 2016. They weren't actually contacted until more than a year later, and there is a suggestion that had they acted sooner, Lucy Letby could have been stopped. One of the things we've learned is that managers at the hospital went as far as actually apologising to Lucy about the allegations that had been made, and even discussed getting her replacement at Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool, which I think is quite staggering. And had the doctors not continued to push, it's not worth thinking about what might have happened had the manager's plan actually gone ahead.
What finally caused her to be caught?
So she was finally caught when, even though the doctors had been told to apologise, which they did do, they sent her a letter, they continued to ask the trust to explain what do they do about the unexpected deaths. They were under the impression at one point that the hospital was investigating the deaths, but when they saw the outcome of that, they realised that actually the managers had not commissioned the forensic review of each death which was needed. And so they kept pushing the hospital executive and eventually saying that, we've reached the end of the line. We have to have a police investigation. And I think at that point, the managers began the process really of engaging with the police. And there was a sort of crucial meeting where there was a discussion with police officers, and the police officers themselves realised what they might have on their hands, and that triggered a rush of action and the start of a police investigation, which ultimately brought Lucy to justice on Friday.
One imagines it must have been a very challenging police investigation. I've just finished reading the Charles Cullen story, and one of the difficulties, the nurse in the US, believed to be one of the worst serial killers in American history, who did similar things with elderly patients. The difficulty is the evidence is regularly circumstantial. How were they able to bring her to justice?
Yeah, so there's a couple of crucial facts about this, and you're right, the evidence was circumstantial, but there was 2 examples where babies were poisoned with insulin, and when insulin is used and you're given an external injection, so the body hasn't created the insulin, it creates a difference in a peptide protein in the body. So you should have an extremely high level of this if you've been given it externally, and the babies didn't have this. And so basically the results of that showed that the only way that insulin could have been given was via an injection or some other way. It wasn't created by the babies themselves. That is proof that someone poisoned those babies, and Lucy Letby herself accepted that there was somebody poisoning those babies. Now, she was on evidence, she was on shift for every single one of the suspicious incidents at the hospital, including the insulin cases. There are other examples as well where when she was shifted from night shifts to day shifts, the deaths followed her to the day shifts. And so, although it was circumstantial and the jury did find her not guilty in some cases, I think the totality of the evidence is that there was just something there that just couldn't be ignored. And we know as well that when the police raided her home, they found evidence of handover sheets that she had kept from the hospital, including babies that we now know she killed. She also searched for victims online and their relatives on Facebook, and she wrote notes in which she said, "I'm evil, I did this, I killed them." So I think you take all of it together, it was a compelling picture for the jury and they convicted her.
I realise it's probably an unanswerable question, Shaun, but have we any sense of why?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. A lot of people are wrestling with this. Lucy Letby denies that she did any of this, and she protests her innocence, and she's said that she won't attend her sentencing today. So she hasn't engaged with why she did this. We may never know, but there are some hints. There is a suggestion that she was an only child. Her parents idolized her. She was the center of attention. And there is a suggestion that, it was about being the center of attention on the ward when the drama happened. She would get the sympathy from her colleagues and staff when things went wrong. And there's also an element as well around a relationship that she had with a doctor that the trial tried to discuss whether or not this was ever a sexual love relationship, but she was infatuated with one doctor. They were very close. He visited her home. He drove her home. They went to visits into London, day walks, meals out, etc. There was a relationship there of some sort, and there are notes that she wrote in which it's clear she had a sort of fixation on this doctor, and it may be that potentially creating these incidents and drama was a way to get his attention and to impress him or to get his sympathy. Simply, the fact is we just may never know really why she did this.
What of the parents of the babies involved? Because the horror of losing a child is one thing, but to discover subsequently that you lost a perfectly healthy child at the hands of a murderer, how have they, what if anything has been said in victim statements? What kind of reaction has there been from the parents?
Well, as you can imagine, it's absolutely awful for the families, and they have been very dignified, and some of them have chosen to stay quiet, and I can completely understand that. Some have spoken out and said quite clearly that they want a full public inquiry here in the UK to examine what happened and the failures of managers to catch her sooner. They obviously are dealing with the consequences of this. Some of Lucy Letby's victims have been left with lifelong disabilities and needs as a result of the attacks that she perpetrated on them. So these families are going to live with the consequences of this for a long time. But they've got lots of questions. We know for a fact that the medical director at the trust ignored not once, not twice, but 3 times he was told to commission a forensic review of the deaths on 3 separate occasions, and he never did that. And I think families want to know why, when the doctors were raising the concerns, did the managers not really take that seriously?
I mentioned earlier on the Charles Cullen case in the US, and in that instance, I think there were 40 murders that he admitted himself, but there is a supposition that there may be hundreds that over several decades that he was responsible for. In Lucy Letby's case, she's been sentenced, she will be sentenced today for the murder of 7 and on 7 counts of attempted murder relating to 6 other babies. Do we have reason to believe the numbers are far greater than that?
It's beginning to look like that, yes. As appalling as that is, the police have said that they're looking at potentially 30 incidents, but this is part of a huge investigation that is spanning the entire history of Lucy Letby's work in the NHS since she qualified in 2011. I think there are over 4,000 cases and babies that are being examined, and the police have also widened their inquiry to look at the Liverpool Women's Hospital where she did some training and work as well. So, this is probably going to take a very long time. It's extremely difficult to investigate old cases like this, very complex medical issues, especially with neonatal babies who are by nature extremely sick. And I think it could be a while before we get a solid answer on this. But I think at this point, it does look like there may be some serious questions over other incidents that involve Lucy Letby.
Shaun, you mentioned her complete lack of remorse or contrition and her possible refusal to attend sentencing. What impact will that have, do you think, on the sentencing, and what can we expect today?
Well, there is obviously we'll find out once the judge delivers the verdict, but there's a lot of expectation here that given Lucy Letby was a nurse, she was in a position of extreme trust, and she betrayed that trust, and obviously in the worst way she's taken 7 very young lives. That these babies were not at death's door, they were expected to improve and be healthy, and they could have had a full life ahead of them. So I think given all of that, we expect here in the UK the judge will issue a very strong sentence, and it may well be that Lucy Letby never leaves prison.
Shaun, thank you very much for that. That's Shaun Lintern, who is health editor at the Sunday Times. If there was anything in that item that you found distressing, just a reminder that the Samaritans are available on 116 123. So if there's anything in that caused you concern, Samaritans 116 123.